Good afternoon, guys. I'm Ryan here alongside Caleb, Indiana Weather Online, as well as Indiana Storm Chasing Network here today. We are going to do a briefing for the evening severe weather threat. Let's go ahead and break it down here, talk about time frames, the outlooks, also the rainfall as well. We have a lot to talk about. So let's go ahead and dive right on into this. Give me a thumbs up here in chat if you guys can hear us. Would appreciate that. Let's go ahead and pop open the stream here as well. Perfect. Audio's good. Let's go ahead and dive right on in. So let's talk about the setup today. We have a couple of things to discuss. First and foremost, the SPC does have a good portion of Indiana in a severe risk. If you find yourself in a dark green, yellow, or orange color, that is a severe risk. The dark green is the lowest risk. It's called marginal, level 1 out of 5. That extends up to about Fort Wayne, over to about Lafayette, and then points southward to about Indianapolis. If you live south of Indianapolis today, you are going to be looking at a little bit higher severe threat, a level 2 slight risk, as they call it, in yellow. And then further south toward Vincennes, Jasper, and Evansville, we find ourselves in an enhanced risk, level 3, for severe weather. So, what are the hazards we are concerned about today? Well, number one is going to be damaging winds, especially for that south and west area there. We do have that yellow and the red area. That's going to be your highest probabilities for damaging winds over 60 miles per hour today. The good news, though, is we don't have a hatched area, which means we're not really expecting anything significant above 70 or 75 miles per hour. They should be on the 60 to maybe 65 mile per hour side today. And that's going to be the highest concern, South Indianapolis there in yellow and orange. Further north, though, a little bit less of a risk. We'll talk about why here in a second. But if you're above Indianapolis there in that brownish red color up to about Muncie, that is going to be a low-end risk for some damaging winds. Secondary threat today, we're looking at large hail. Now, the hail, again, highest risk for large hail, further south, south of Terre Haute, south of Indianapolis. Further north, again, in that brownish red color, a risk still exists, but it's a lower end risk. Okay. Going into the last hazard today, we're looking at a tornado risk here, primarily south of Indianapolis there. Dark green, or the green color there, goes just south of Indianapolis Metro there toward Martinsville, for example, over to Terre Haute, over toward about that Seymour area, over toward the Ohio, Cincinnati area. Then points back to the south there. Higher risk for a tornado or two there in the Vincennes, Jasper, Corydon, and Evansville area in that red-brown color. All right, so an all hazards type of event. Let's go ahead and break down why we are concerned about that. So we're looking at the HRRR here. This is the latest model run here. It's showing the evolution of how storms may evolve tonight. We're going to see a couple showers and storms out there currently across the state. We're getting a decent break from the rain. And as we know on your screen, there's a flash flood warning in effect for numerous areas across southern Indiana there due to the rainfall. The rainfall has just been nonstop the past couple of days here. But as we move into tonight, we're going to look at showers and storms developing across Illinois. We're going to see those push into the state here. This is 8 p.m. Eastern time. We're going to start seeing that line develop off to our west here, pushing our way. Here's 9 p.m. Eastern. Here's 10 p.m. Eastern. Notice the line's oriented from the northeast back to the southwest. So storms are going to arrive, for example, up in the Lafayette area before they will arrive down here in Evansville, just because the way these are oriented today. Moving on, though, 10 o'clock Eastern. Here's 11 o'clock here. That will continue to slowly push across the state here. As it does so, a nice potent line of storms develops here from basically Fort Wayne on down south through the Evansville area. Now, moving into the overnight, here's midnight Eastern. Here's 1 a.m., 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m., and by about 5 or so, those storms are finally pushing out of the state. Talking about the ingredients, so the reason we're concerned further south of Indianapolis is because of one thing in particular, and that's going to be our instability. Caleb, do you want to tell us the ingredients for today?
Yeah, absolutely. So we like to talk about ingredients in the SLIM factor: shear, lift, instability, and moisture. And here's a look at our instability here as it moves northward into Indiana. Brighter colors there, your reds, your yellows, that is your higher instability. You can see here we have some instability working its way up here later this evening, with the greatest instability being across southern Indiana, south of Indianapolis. And that is why we have the highest risk for severe weather across southern Indiana, generally south of Indianapolis there, highlighted in yellow and orange. And a lot of that has to do with our instability. A little bit less instability the further north you go. So some of those showers and thunderstorms north of Indianapolis might be what we call elevated thunderstorms, meaning their cloud bases are a little bit higher just due to that elevated instability. So a little bit of a hail risk north of Indianapolis, but the damaging wind risk goes down quite a bit with those higher cloud bases. So that is best case scenario north of Indianapolis. But we have a lot of wind shear present today, especially across southern Indiana. You can see those brighter reds there. That is a lot of wind shear. But where those meet, where you have the higher wind shear and instability meet, that is where our greatest risk for severe weather, including tornadoes, is, especially favored across southwest lower Indiana. Though the entire state of Indiana and the entire region is highly sheared, as we call it, we don't have the instability overlapping that high wind shear across portions of northern Indiana like we do across southern Indiana. So therefore, your highest area favored for severe weather is southern Indiana, especially southwest Indiana, Evansville, Jasper, up to Vincennes, just south of Terre Haute, Mount Vernon as well. Those areas need to be on alert for all hazards here tonight from tornadoes, damaging winds, and perhaps a few hailstones as well cannot be ruled out. So that is the look at the ingredients here tonight. So again, kind of a multi-hazard night here. And another reason to have multiple warnings here tonight is this will go into the early mornings, overnight tonight. It'll be dark outside for a lot of us. A lot of us will be in bed. This threat will persist all the way into tomorrow morning, Saturday morning, and exit the state just before many of us get on the road to go to work. If you guys do work on Saturday morning, otherwise, I know a lot of us are sleeping in Saturday morning. So again, a lot of us will be in our beds, asleep during the risk here tonight. And another thing to point out too is our slow storm motions. These storms are not going to be moving overly fast across Indiana. This is going to bring a significant risk for flash flooding across primarily southern Indiana. Again, our soils are already so saturated. We have seen inches of rain, inches plural, with many areas seeing 3 to 5, even approaching 6 inches of rain already across especially southern Indiana, with an additional 2 to 4 inches of rain yet to come across many areas of central and southern Indiana, with a few isolated pockets higher than that, especially where you get some heavier thunderstorms where they train. We could see some rainfall rates in excess of 1 inch per hour here tonight, maybe even approaching 1.5 inches. I would not be surprised to see that in some areas. Again, really juicy thunderstorms, a lot of moisture to work with, and the flood risk will persist well after the severe weather event is over. In fact, next week we go into a quieter period weather-wise. However, the flood risk is still going to remain across a good portion of Indiana, especially portions of central and southern Indiana. It's going to take that much time to allow our river basins to fully drain and get back to where they were a few days ago. It's going to take some extra time. Some significant river flooding is also possible. Many rivers are forecasted to go into major flood stage, including the White River as well, both forks, East and West Fork, across central and southern Indiana.
If you guys got questions about the overall threat tonight, as well as flooding concerns, go ahead and drop it in chat here. We're at your disposal for the next couple of minutes. Also, we have a threat tomorrow for severe weather on Saturday. We'll talk about that more in detail tomorrow on a briefing, but keep in mind, the southern part of Indiana finds itself once again in a low end and also medium risks there in yellow for severe weather during the day on Saturdays. So we'll keep a close eye on that as well. But let's focus on tonight. We do have that threat tonight, and we'll be live here later on this evening in the event of anything severe or tornadic in the state of Indiana. We'll be live covering it here from beginning to end.
Yeah, but again, all hazards possible here tonight, primarily across southern and southwest Indiana. Damaging winds to 60 to 65 miles an hour. Can't rule out a few hailstones, quarter size, maybe working their way up the ping pong ball size if we can get some isolated storms to develop. But otherwise, I think the hail threat will remain closer to quarters here tonight. And then we'd also have that non-zero tornado risk across Indiana, especially across southwest lower Indiana in areas shaded in brown. Green, you guys are in a low risk for tornadoes. and a little bit higher of a risk there in brown, but not too far away from the southern boot of Indiana. We have a yellow hatched area where significant tornadoes are possible, EF2 plus. So we're going to have to keep an eye on that very closely to see if those parameters do, in fact, reach their way into southern Indiana from Vincennes, Jasper, down to Evansville. We're going to have to watch the boot of Wells County pretty closely. Again, that's where we have the greatest overlap of shear, lift, instability, and moisture. Moisture is not a problem anywhere in the state of Indiana, nor is wind shear. Again, we're highly sheared across the entire state of Indiana. Our biggest limiting factor tonight is instability. How far north does that instability go later tonight? But right now, models are in pretty good agreement that we're going to see enough instability moving into southern Indiana to support severe thunderstorms, including a few tornadoes as well. Again, where you see those deeper greens, even some yellows, that is your instability. Again, where the instability is greatest is areas south of Indianapolis, which is why the Storm Prediction Center has an area in yellow across southern Indiana, as well as an enhanced risk across southwest Indiana. You can see some deeper greens there in southwest Indiana, indicating some higher levels of instability there.
Got a couple questions in chat here. Do you think any watches will be issued tonight? Asks Cindy. What do you think, Caleb?
I think it's possible. I think it largely is dependent on the evolution of these storms. Again, instability being our greatest uncertainty, our biggest, I guess, our limitation right now. How far north did that instability go, and how does that play a role in the evolution of these thunderstorms? But I wouldn't be surprised. I think areas across southern Indiana, southwest Indiana specifically, Evansville, Jasper, down to Mount Vernon have the highest probability of being in a watch. Whether it be a tornado watch or a severe thunderstorm watch will ultimately be determined by the storm mode we have. Are we going to have isolated supercells, or are we going to have a consolidated line moving through? Right now, models are in pretty good agreement that it's going to be a line, but we can't rule out an isolated supercell out ahead of the main line, especially across near the Ohio River Valley Basin, across southern Indiana and northern Kentucky. But again, severe thunderstorm watch or tornado watch, that'll be largely determined on the evolution of these storms and the environment as a whole as we go into tonight. But I think it's possible.
Mary in chat here asking about Auburn. Auburn, I'd say, is a little bit too far north tonight for severe weather. You may still get some rumbles of thunder up there, but the instability and the overall ingredients for like large hail or damaging winds much higher further south, especially south of Indianapolis. There, I think you're too far north that far.
Yeah, for a road network for reference, there, I think US 24 and south for the best probability of maybe a stronger storm. But even then, your chances are low. You really want to be south of the I-70 corridor for your severe weather. Is really kind of a grid to look at there. Areas north of Fort Wayne, no severe weather for you guys, just some rain, and it'll be a colder rain as well, and perhaps a few rumbles of thunder. Anderson, Indiana, have a lot of sympathy for your area, the Carmel area, Henderson County, and areas surrounding. Yeah, you guys got hit pretty hard the other night. Again, severe risk is non-zero there. Greatest risk a little bit to your south. But being on the edge, a lot of that will be determined by how far north our instability is able to go. The farther north, the greater chance for severe weather. If it stays on the south side of Indianapolis, your chances are a little bit lower. But again, damaging winds and small hail, probably the greatest risks for those of you in Anderson. I think the greatest tornado risk will be just off to your south. But again, non-zero threat there, but it'll be highest across southwest lower Indiana.
Questions coming in here. We got the Muncie and Winchester area, and I'm going to say for you guys, you're kind of on the northern edge of the risk area. I would expect there potentially to be perhaps a large hailstone or two, but it's not going to be a widespread severe event tonight up that farther north. I wouldn't be shocked if we have one or two, warnings or some storms that try to produce large hail, but I would say it's going to be probably isolated in nature, so your chances are much lower tonight for severe weather versus what it was a couple nights ago when we had that moderate risk in place. So I would expect potential, yes, but overall concern, I guess, on the lower end, if that makes sense tonight.
Yeah, probably the greatest risk, especially once you go north, if you put the severe weather aside, it's going to be heavy rainfall, renewed ponding, excessive runoff, water on roadways. That's going to be our highest risk there. As you can see there, depicted by this future radar on our forecast model here, some pretty heavy returns here coming in, a lot of reds, a lot of oranges, even north of Indianapolis, stretching up to the Jay Blackford County area later tonight. Again, could have some heavy rainfall, even though these may not be severe, or they could be strong. Heavy rainfall is going to occur tonight, which could lead to flash flooding anywhere across central and especially southern Indiana. Again, our soils are saturated across the state. It doesn't take much to have ponding. Again, our soils can hold the water. They're going to immediately run off and cause ponding and ditches to be filled up once again. But we can go ahead and time out our future radar again one more time here for those of you just joining in here. Ryan, if you want to go ahead and time it out here real quick, and then we'll move on.
Sure. So tonight we could have some lingering showers further north across Fort Wayne and Gola over toward north of Kokomo there, up towards South Bend, Gary. The real concern for severe happens a little bit later on. Here's 8 p.m. We're going to see these storms starting to develop, move into the western part of Indiana here. Here's 9 p.m. Eastern. We're going to start seeing a little bit more of those reds and oranges shown up there as that line organizes, as it strengthens. So as that pushes slowly off to the east, here's 10 p.m. Our first arrival of storms will be Lafayette over to about Kokomo. But further south here, we're still dry, maybe an isolated storm down here. But for the most part, we're still dry until the other part of the line moves in. So it's going to start further west central, further north first, and then a little bit further south, it'll start a little bit later on. So here's 10 p.m. Here is 11 p.m. There's midnight going to 1 a.m. This is all Eastern time. Here's 2 a.m. Here is 3 a.m. By about 4 and 5 o'clock in the morning, these storms are finally pushing out of the state into Kentucky and Ohio, but we still have rain that lingers around there to start your Saturday morning. So keep that in mind. Just because the severe weather threat's over, by about 4 o'clock, it'll still be raining, likely with embedded thunderstorms as well. But the main risk for severe is out of the state by about 4 or 5.
Yeah, but also keep in mind for those of you on the roads tomorrow morning, watch for ponding. A lot of flooding, excessive runoff as well. Again, the flood risk will extend well beyond our risk for severe weather. It's going to take a few extra days to allow our water basins to fully drain and recede back to pre-flood levels. And some river flooding may be problematic well into the middle of next week as well, as we just have that much water that needs to drain from our river basins before we reach back to pre-flood levels. Again, many area rivers, especially across central and southern Indiana, are forecasted to crest near major flood stage, including the east and west fork of the White River in central and southern Indiana, and surrounding tributaries and rivers as well. So if you do live in an area that is prone for flooding, ponding, watch water levels very, very closely and have alternate routes just in case your main route to town or where you normally go is closed due to high water. We are expecting several road closures to become more numerous across central and southern Indiana due to flooding.
We'll also just mention the fact that we just had the latest SPC update at 4 p.m. just released. Very little change there. That slight risk is still south of Indy. That's where the highest concern tonight for severe weather is going to be. Not to say it's going to happen further north, across Lafayette, Fort Wayne, Muncie areas. I do think the risk is much higher further south this evening. Also, I want to pop this in as well. The current hazards out there across the state, across the region, all those dark green colored areas, those are all flood watches. All the bright green are flood warnings, and then all the reds are flash flood warnings. So flood warnings essentially basically mean that, hey, rivers are going to overflow here. They could cause issues in towns and businesses that are close to them. The flash flood warnings are different because those are more of a life-threatening situation where there's going to be probably active water running through areas that could sweep you away. So if you find yourself in a flash flood warning currently, you need to take it very seriously. Make sure you find higher ground if you are prone to a low-lying area. And looking at this as well, Caleb, I don't believe we have any flash flood warnings in the state of Indiana here. I think it's just flood warnings in general. I don't see any active.
Yep, flash flood warnings are just south of the Ohio River, but we could see some renewed flash flood warnings tonight as our next wave of rain comes in. It could be quite heavy at times. Again, rainfall rates in excess of 1 inch to 1.5 inches an hour cannot be ruled out in some of the heavier cells associated with this next round of rain as it comes in. But there is light at the end of the tunnel. Once we get through this weekend here, we are going to go into a quieter period in terms of severe weather. It's going to be a colder period here. High temperatures are going to be rather chilly across the state into next week, but that will also keep the severe weather at bay for the next week and a half before potentially turning active again by late month. But again, stuff we'll have to keep an eye on, but we do look to get a break here in the next week, which is good. Much needed.
I agree. Bloomington got a question in chat here. Bloomington is well within that risk tonight. Anywhere south of Indianapolis, it doesn't matter if you're Terre Haute, Bloomington, Corydon, Jasper, Vincennes, Evansville, Seymour. You guys are in that risk tonight for severe. Technically in a risk all the way up to Fort Wayne, Lafayette. I would say the much higher risk is further south there, especially in yellow and orange areas.
Yep. What about going to the Pacers game tonight in Indianapolis? You guys should be fine. The severe weather risk will come a little bit later, I think, than that game. But keep an eye on the weather nonetheless, especially as you leave the game. Some storms may be approaching Indianapolis. Again, highest severe weather threat just to your south. But those of you in green are in a non-zero risk. So you could have some gusty winds, hail, and heavy rainfall associated in the Indianapolis metro. But nothing like what we saw the other night, thankfully. I don't expect any 80-mile-per-hour winds to impact the state tonight. Hopefully that trend continues. But again, primary hazards here tonight. Go ahead and take a look at those. Damaging winds is a primary risk there. Greatest potential in areas in red. You can see the SPC did expand that a little bit further east to include the Corydon area there, now in a red risk for severe weather. That is a higher probability of 60-plus mile-per-hour winds. Highest probabilities in yellow and red. A non-zero probability in brown. Just areas in brown, they'll be more sporadic in nature. We do have a non-zero tornado risk to talk about here in Indiana tonight, with the greatest risk spreading across southwest lower Indiana to include places such as Vincennes, Jasper, Corydon there. And that hatched area for an EF2 plus tornado is just south of the Ohio River, just south of Evansville there. We're going to have to watch southern Indiana exceptionally close just in case we do get any more increased instability. Again, increased instability would mean more robust thunderstorms and more fuel for the thunderstorms to tap into. Again, take that fuel away. The severe weather threat will go down as a result. Increase more fuel. The severe weather risk will go up as it gives more potential for those thunderstorms. Greatest risk for tornadoes in areas in yellow and brown across southern Indiana, and then a little bit less in areas in green. But nonetheless, tornado risk does exist across all of southern Indiana tonight through tomorrow morning.
Chrissy asks, have you gotten any sleep lately? Yeah, we've been getting some good sleep. We were up until about 3 o'clock last night watching thunderstorms across Indiana there. But we got some good sleep, and we're ready to go for the evening. We'll be up all night, more than likely, tracking these storms for you guys. So if you guys happen to find yourselves in warnings or want information, feel free to come on back. We'll most likely be live at the first warning here in the state of Indiana.
Yep, and another risk that we do have here tonight, besides wind and tornadoes, we do have a hail risk that does exist for nearly 2/3 of the state of Indiana. Lesser risk in brown, more sporadic risk in brown for some sporadic storms that maybe produce some quarters, with the greatest risk in areas in yellow from Terre Haute, Bloomington, Corydon, Jasper, Vincennes, down to Evansville in areas in yellow, generally south of the 74 corridor there. And this will be an overnight risk tonight as well. A lot of this will be dry up until most of us go to bed. And then don't be surprised if many of us are awakened tonight by the sound of thunder. Again, this will be an overnight risk stretching from about 7 o'clock tonight through about 5 a.m. tomorrow morning. Storms really become more numerous after the 9 p.m. time frame. And then from there, they'll slowly track east across the state. This is not going to be a fast-moving event. In fact, these storms may not move much faster than 45 miles an hour east-southeast, kind of situated along a stationary boundary or a frontal boundary, as we call it. It's really been responsible for rounds and rounds of rain that we've had here over the last 3 days. It's just kind of stalled out across the Ohio River Valley region. But luckily, After this system moves out, that frontal boundary will eventually get kicked off to the southeast and out of the continental United States here by next week, and that'll help dry us off as well. So, good news. Mhm. Yeah, so kind of an uncommon situation there, but also not entirely uncommon either. So this was a situation where these occurred from what we call mesovortices. So mesovortices, in short, are embedded areas of rotation on the leading edge of a line of thunderstorms. A lot of times when you have these squall lines that move through, you get a lot of turbulence on the leading edge where some winds are moving faster ahead of the storm than others, and where you have that difference in wind speed, you can get little spin ups that occur. What was unusual about this is that two of those spin ups occurred at the exact same time and really only about a mile and a half apart in eastern Adams County. And a lot of this was associated with what we call an MCV, or mesoscale convective vortex. This is an upper level spin feature that we have here associated with a line of thunderstorms. Sometimes that upper level spin can help enhance thunderstorms, but it can also bring down some lower level spin occasionally as well. And that's what we saw there. Is it also that same feature helped produce some tornadoes in Van Wert as well, across Northwest Ohio too. Some sporadic touchdowns that occur there as well. So you don't see it all too often, especially two on the ground at the exact same time. But especially that close together, pretty unusual. But again, it just really goes to show how dangerous QLCS setups are. As keep in mind, none of those had a tornado warning, and I'll explain why. So the rotation there associated with those storms were so shallow, radar didn't pick it up very well. It was showing much broader rotation on radar. So therefore, the National Weather Service left a tornado possible tag on it and did not issue a tornado warning. A lot of times when you have a tornado reach EF1 status, a lot of times you'll see what's called a TDS, or a tornadic debris signature on radar. A lot of times you have a tornado of that strength and magnitude, you'll see debris getting picked up on radar. However, this one spun up and dissipated so fast, radar never picked up that debris, so we never saw that TDS. So that's another reason why these spin-up tornadoes are so dangerous. The rotation is very shallow, oftentimes under the radar. And when you're in northeast Indiana, Adams County, Grant County, Jay County area, you're in between radar. So your radar beam is several thousand feet up in the air. So when your strongest rotation is underneath the radar, you're going to get a much different representation on radar than what's actually occurring there. So another reason to take warnings very seriously on events like that. So yeah, it was pretty unique. Thankfully, nobody was hurt or killed in those tornadoes. So that is good news there, as always.
It absolutely is.
But that does put us in officially, though, Ryan, an above average tornado season now in the state of Indiana. We averaged 22, and that puts us at
As of
we at
this
20
morning, 24, but I believe we have a couple more confirmed today, so it could be 25, 26-ish. I've yet to look at the new data there, but we're probably between 24 and 26 officially here confirmed by NWS.
Yeah, pretty impressive to say the least. Chrissy has a really good question here. Not really off topic, but a good question here. How does the NWS evaluate the damage and rate for tornadoes? Tornadoes aftermath. Yeah, it's a really good question, Chrissy. So what they do is the National Weather Service, as well as emergency management, will go out and they'll assess the damage that a tornado does, and they have something called a degree of damage chart, or a DoD chart. And what they do is it really goes into forensic meteorology. They try to figure out, they look at the structures and damage that was caused, and on that chart they have a reference guide based on different engineering data points on how structures were built. They look at the ratings based on how those structures were built. The more damage you have to a well-built structure, the higher that tornado will be rated. And then the more damage you have to a weaker structure, the lesser that tornado will be rated. So it really depends on how much damage is caused and how well those structures were built as how they assess tornado damage. And if a tornado touches down in a field and there is no damage that is done by that tornado, it will get rated an EFU, which stands for EF unknown, because it didn't cause any damage. So we don't know what the wind speeds were, as we have no guides to base it off of. So that's kind of a little bit of a nutshell of how the National Weather Service assesses tornadoes. It's all based on the damage they cause. and the engineering features of those structures as well. Were they reinforced properly? Were they weak? Were they prefabricated? Those are all things that the National Weather Service will take into consideration when rating tornadoes. So it can be a lengthy process as well. So is why damage surveys are still ongoing across the state of Indiana. So don't be surprised if we do have a couple more confirmed tornadoes confirmed over the next couple of days from Wednesday's event. So good question there.
Speaking of questions, we'll take questions for a few more minutes here before we hop out of here. Been live for about 35 minutes. We have a severe threat tonight. If you're just joining us, we have a primarily south of Indianapolis threat tonight. Could get some isolated, larger hailstones up further north, maybe a damaging wind gust up there in dark green areas. For the most part, though, in the yellow and orange areas is where the concern really starts to ramp up. That's because we have a lot of surface fuel for these storms further south, whereas further north, there's not much surface fuel, but there is enough fuel in the upper levels of the atmosphere to produce those larger hailstones as well. So primarily a risk tonight, south Indianapolis. It's going to be wind, primary threat, hail, secondary, as well as a tornado threat developing later on in the overnight hours as this line moves in across the yellow and orange areas.
Yep, again, greatest risk for severe weather are those in yellow and orange. Again, this will be an overnight risk tonight. Have multiple ways to receive warnings after you go to bed here tonight. Many of us will be sleeping when the severe weather occurs and when these storms roll through. So again, having your NOAA weather radio turned on, having your alerts turned on your phone. If you guys don't have an emergency weather app downloaded on your phone, NOAA Weather Radio has an app for that, as well as the Red Cross. Two great resources there to download on your phone that will alert you in the time that a severe thunderstorm warning is issued for your area. That way, you know what the hazards are, and you guys can get to shelter and react appropriately. And we'll also be live here on IWO and ISCN here for the risk of severe weather tonight as soon as we have a severe warning issued, whether that's tornadic or severe.
What do you think, Caleb? About 3 more minutes or so? Take questions?
Yeah. Couple more minutes here to answer questions here, and then we'll go ahead and hop off here. We do have some more things here to do ahead of tonight's severe weather event here behind the scenes to get ready for that. So if you guys do have any more questions, feel free to drop them in. You have Ryan and I here for the next 3 to 5 minutes here before we hop off. It is 4:20 now. We'll go to 4:25. So if you guys do have any more questions here, feel free to put them in before we hop off here at 4:25. And while we're waiting on that, let's go ahead and time out reflectivity, Ryan, one more time here for those of you just joining in while we wait on those last few questions to pop in here. Ryan, go ahead and take it away with that.
Sure. This is 7 p.m. Eastern. All the times I'm about to say are going to be Eastern time. So if you're in Central, take an hour behind it. So this would be 6 p.m. Central. So go ahead and move into 8 p.m. Eastern. Here's 9 p.m. We're going to start seeing those storms arrive sometime between 7 and 9 o'clock in the western part toward Lafayette area, those areas in general. Further south here toward Evansville, we could have some isolated cells popping up there before ahead of the main line there, but those are going to be a little bit more uncertain if they're going to actually pop up or not. But do keep in mind we could have some cells popping up before. Here's 9 p.m. Eastern. Let's go to 10 p.m., 11 p.m. Here is midnight Eastern time here. And as these storms arrive, the best storm fuel for the damaging wind, large hail, and perhaps a tornado threat is going to be down in this part of the line. Further north up here will be most likely a hail risk and maybe some gusty winds as well. But further south here, where the instability is still lingering around this time frame, will be the area to watch for a tornado as well as a damaging wind threat as well, in addition to hail. Moving on, here's 1 a.m. Eastern. Here's 2, 3 a.m., 4 a.m., and about 5 or so. They're pushing finally out into Kentucky, into Ohio, but rain remains behind it, as well as likely some general thunderstorms that are not severe past that 5 a.m. time frame. So again, putting it all into perspective here, expect storms to increase in nature starting around 7 to 9 p.m. tonight. That's your start time. And then it's going to go all the way overnight into the 4 to 5 a.m. time frame, slowly progressing eastward. Hazards, again, we do have that risk for most highest risk further south of Indianapolis there in yellow and orange. We do have a risk for damaging winds. Here's your hail, as well as a potential for a tornado. And Caleb, at the 4 p.m. update, they did increase probabilities for that southern tier counties to a 10% for Evansville and Corydon areas. So if you live further south toward the Ohio River Valley, the risk for tornadoes is increased there from the SPC at the latest outlook. So we're going to watch that very carefully here. And as Caleb said before, we'll be live in the event of any severe or tornadic warnings here, both on ISCN and IWO simultaneously. So we got you guys covered here as long as these storms are in Indiana and have severe warnings on them.
Yep. So again, with that said, have multiple ways to receive warnings tonight, whether that would be NOAA Weather Radio, NOAA Weather Radio mobile app you can download on your smartphone. That'll alert you. Make sure your notifications are turned on for that with your volume on. That way it alerts you. Red Cross has a terrific app for severe weather. You can go through settings and you can actually tune that app, I believe, to go off when warnings are issued for your neighboring counties or your county as well, depending on your preference there. It'll kind of make a doodle-doodle-doodle when it goes off during severe weather events. So again, it is very loud. It will wake you up, which is what you want, especially on our nocturnal events. And remember, the severe weather risk always increases at night. A lot of us are in bed. It's dark outside. We can't always see the hazards coming. So another reason to get those alerts and react appropriately and remain weather aware.
All right, Caleb, I don't see more questions in here. So I think we're going to be good to wrap it up here. We'll continue to post updates on our pages to keep you guys informed. So stay tuned for those. And as we said, we'll be live here at the first severe warning in the state of Indiana. So we'll have you guys covered from the beginning to the end of this. So come back later if you want some coverage. Hang out with us, ask questions. We are going to be here tonight, likely for a few hours at very least. So enjoy your evening. We'll catch you guys later.